Have you ever been in a conversation where someone asks, "So, how's the weather?" And instead of answering, your mind quietly wonders, "Why are we talking about this?" You nod politely. You respond with the expected smile. But inside, something feels strangely disconnected. For some people, small talk feels like a social ritual. But for others, it feels like wearing a mask. And the truth is, the people who dislike small talk are often misunderstood. They are labeled as antisocial, awkward, or distant. But in reality, their psychology reveals something very different. They are not avoiding people. They are avoiding emptiness. Small talk often revolves around predictable and repetitive topics. Weather, traffic, daily routines, or polite greetings that rarely go beyond the surface. For many people, these exchanges serve as social lubrication, a comfortable way to acknowledge one another without revealing too much. But for deep thinkers, this type of interaction can feel strangely hollow. Their minds instinctively move toward meaning, patterns, and underlying motivations, and when conversation remains confined to safe, surface-level subjects, it creates a quiet sense of psychological dissatisfaction. A deep thinker's mind rarely rests on what is immediately visible. When someone mentions the weather, the deep thinker's mind may already be wandering toward more complex reflections, how people structure their daily lives, how emotions influence behavior, or how individuals construct identities in social spaces. While others treat conversation as a simple exchange of information, deep thinkers experience it as an opportunity to explore ideas, emotions, and the unseen layers of human experience. Because of this, small talk can feel like standing at the entrance of a vast landscape, but never being allowed to step inside. This does not mean deep thinkers believe small talk is meaningless for everyone. They understand that many social environments rely on it. Offices, gatherings, and casual encounters often begin with these light exchanges because they are safe and non-threatening. They allow strangers to acknowledge one another without exposing vulnerability. Yet for someone who naturally seeks depth, remaining in that shallow territory for too long creates a sense that something authentic is being withheld. Another reason small talk feels superficial to deep thinkers is that it often follows unspoken scripts. People ask questions not necessarily because they want real answers, but because the situation demands it. How are you? Becomes less of a genuine inquiry and more of a ritual greeting. Deep thinkers tend to notice this subtle disconnection. They sense when words are being used out of habit rather than curiosity, and this awareness makes the interaction feel artificial. For a mind that values authenticity, scripted communication can feel like watching a performance rather than participating in a real moment. The deep thinker might respond politely, but internally they may feel detached, as though the conversation is moving along a predictable path with no room for discovery. This is partly because deep thinkers are naturally drawn to questions that uncover hidden layers. Instead of asking what someone did during the weekend, they might more interested in what inspires that person, what fears shape their decisions, or what experiences change their perspective on life. These types of discussions reveal something essential about a person's inner world. Small talk, by contrast, tends to orbit around external circumstances rather than internal realities. There is also a strong element of mental stimulation involved. Deep thinkers often enjoy conversations that challenge their thinking, introduce unfamiliar perspectives, or spark philosophical curiosity. When dialogue remains limited to routine topics, the mind receives very little stimulation. It becomes similar to reading the same page of a book repeatedly without discovering anything new. Because of this, deep thinkers may appear quiet in social situations where small talk dominates. Others might assume they are shy or uninterested, but the truth is usually different. Their silence often comes from waiting for a conversation that moves beyond surface exchanges into something genuine. They are not withdrawing from people, they are waiting for a moment of intellectual or emotional depth. Another aspect of this psychology is sensitivity to authenticity. Deep thinkers tend to notice subtle emotional signals, contradictions in tone, or moments when people say one thing but feel another. Small talk often encourages people to hide those deeper emotions behind polite responses. While this keeps interactions comfortable, it also creates a barrier between what is said and what is actually felt. For someone who values honesty and depth, that barrier can make the conversation feel incomplete. This is why many deep thinkers come alive in environments where meaningful dialogue is welcomed. When the topic shifts toward personal experiences, philosophical ideas, or the complexities of human behavior, their energy changes. Suddenly, conversation becomes engaging rather than draining. Their thoughts flow freely, curiosity awakens, and the interaction feels alive rather than mechanical. For them, conversation is not merely about exchanging words. It is about exploring the inner architecture of human experience, the hidden motives behind actions, and the emotional truths people rarely speak about openly. When conversation remains on the surface, it feels like circling around something important without ever touching it, leaving the mind quietly searching for depth in a space designed for simplicity. Human beings naturally seek connection, but not all connections satisfy the mind in the same way. Some interactions remain on the surface, polite exchanges, predictable questions, and socially acceptable responses. While these interactions serve a practical purpose in daily life, they rarely satisfy the deeper psychological need for authenticity. For certain individuals, especially those who think introspectively, the mind does not simply want conversation, it wants something real. It wants to encounter another person beyond the masks, roles, and social scripts that often dominate everyday communication. Authentic connection begins when people allow themselves to move beyond appearances. Most individuals present a version of themselves shaped by expectations, how they should behave, what they should say, and which parts of their personality are acceptable to reveal. Society quietly trains people to manage impressions, to protect their vulnerabilities, and to maintain emotional boundaries in public interactions. This creates a form of distance between individuals, even when they are physically close or frequently speaking. The words are there, the smiles are there, yet something essential remains hidden. For the mind that craves authenticity, this hidden layer becomes impossible to ignore. Such individuals instinctively sense when conversations are guided more by politeness than curiosity. They notice when people repeat the same rehearsed responses or avoid expressing genuine thoughts and feelings. This awareness creates a subtle dissatisfaction, not because they reject social interaction, but because they can feel the difference between performance and sincerity. Authentic connection carries a different psychological energy. When someone speaks honestly about their thoughts, fears, or experiences, the atmosphere of the conversation shifts. The interaction becomes less about maintaining appearances and more about understanding another person's inner world. In those moments, communication transforms from a routine exchange into a shared exploration of human experience. The mind responds strongly to this shift because authenticity signals trust. When someone expresses a real thought or emotion, they momentarily lower the protective barriers that usually guard their identity. This vulnerability creates a sense of psychological closeness that cannot be replicated by surface-level conversation. It invites the other person to respond with the same honesty, gradually replacing social formality with genuine dialogue. People who crave authentic connection often find themselves drawn to discussions that reveal personal meaning. They want to know what shapes a person's beliefs, what experiences have influenced their character, and what internal conflicts they struggle with. These conversations allow them to see beyond the visible personality and into the deeper structure of someone's identity. This desire for authenticity also reflects an inner psychological orientation toward truth. Some individuals feel uncomfortable maintaining conversations that revolve around safe, neutral topics if those topics prevent real understanding from emerging. Their mind constantly searches for emotional and intellectual substance, something that reveals how another person truly sees the world. At the same time, this search for authenticity can make ordinary social situations feel draining. When a conversation remains confined to surface-level exchanges, the mind senses that a deeper level of communication is possible, but not being accessed. It becomes similar to standing in a room full of doors that remain closed. The potential for meaningful connection exists, yet the conversation never moves beyond the entrance. Authentic connection also involves listening with genuine attention. When people truly engage with one another, they are not simply waiting for their turn to speak. They are observing subtle changes in tone, expression, and emotion. They respond not only to the words being said, but to the feelings behind those words. This type of listening communicates respect and understanding, reinforcing the sense that the interaction is real rather than mechanical. Many individuals who crave authentic connection are also comfortable discussing topics that others might avoid. Questions about purpose, identity, personal struggles, and emotional growth often emerge naturally in their conversations. These topics invite reflection rather than quick responses, creating space for people to reveal aspects of themselves that are rarely expressed in casual dialogue. In environments where authenticity is welcomed, these individuals often become deeply engaged and expressive. Their curiosity intensifies, their attention sharpens, and conversation begins to feel meaningful rather than obligatory. Instead of simply exchanging information, they are participating in a moment of genuine understanding between two minds, where thoughts and emotions move freely without the constant pressure to maintain a social facade. In many social environments, silence is often treated as something uncomfortable, something that must be filled as quickly as possible. When a pause appears in a conversation, people instinctively search for words to close the gap. They might comment on the weather, mention something trivial, or ask a predictable question simply to prevent the moment from feeling awkward. Society subtly trains people to believe that constant talking is a sign of confidence and engagement. Yet for certain individuals, silence does not carry the same negative meaning. Instead of feeling uncomfortable, it feels natural, even honest. For people who dislike forced conversation, silence can feel more genuine than speaking without purpose. Words that are spoken only to maintain social flow often lack sincerity. They follow patterns and expectations rather than authentic thought. The mind senses when language becomes automatic rather than meaningful, and this awareness creates a subtle sense of disconnection. Speaking simply to avoid quietness can feel like performing a role rather than expressing something real. Silence, on the other hand, does not pretend. It does not require people to hide their true state of mind behind polite phrases or rehearsed responses. When two individuals share a quiet moment without pressure to fill it with unnecessary dialogue, the interaction often feels more relaxed and authentic. There is no need to invent topics or maintain appearances. The space simply exists, allowing both people to be present without obligation. For introspective individuals, silence also provides mental clarity. The human mind constantly processes information, emotions, and observations, and quiet moments allow these internal processes to unfold naturally. When conversations become filled with empty or repetitive talk, the mind struggles to remain engaged because it is not receiving meaningful stimulation. Silence offers the opposite experience. It creates room for reflection, awareness, and subtle observation. People who appreciate silence often notice details others overlook. When words stop dominating the moment, attention shifts toward nonverbal signals. Body language, facial expressions, tone, and emotional atmosphere. These signals often communicate more truth than spoken words. A slight change in posture, a brief hesitation before speaking, or a subtle shift in tone can reveal thoughts and feelings that language tries to conceal. This heightened awareness is one reason silence feels honest to certain personalities. Words can be shaped to create impressions, hide insecurities, or maintain social harmony. Silence does not perform these functions. It simply exists, allowing reality to reveal itself without decoration. In quiet moments, people become more aware of the emotional environment around them. They sense tension, comfort, curiosity, or unease in ways that constant conversation can easily mask. Silence can also serve as a form of respect. When someone speaks about something meaningful, a quiet pause often communicates attentiveness and thoughtfulness. Instead of immediately responding with another statement, silence allows the mind to process what has been said. It acknowledges that the words carried weight and deserve reflection. In this sense, silence becomes part of the communication itself, a space where meaning can settle before new thoughts emerge. For individuals who value authenticity, forced words often feel unnecessary because they interrupt this natural rhythm of communication. When someone speaks only to prevent a pause, the conversation may continue moving, but without depth. The interaction becomes a sequence of polite exchanges rather than a meaningful connection between two minds. Silence protects the possibility that when words finally appear, they will carry genuine intention. Another psychological aspect of silence is emotional honesty. People often use conversation to avoid confronting certain feelings or thoughts. By constantly talking, they keep attention focused outward rather than inward. Silence removes this distraction. It invites awareness of one's own internal state, whether that state involves calm, curiosity, uncertainty, or reflection. For someone comfortable with introspection, this quiet awareness does not feel threatening. It feels truthful. In social settings where silence is accepted rather than feared, communication tends to feel more natural. Words appear when they have purpose rather than when they are required. Conversations develop organically, moving from quiet observation to meaningful dialogue without the pressure to maintain constant verbal activity. In such moments, silence does not represent emptiness. It becomes a quiet foundation where genuine thoughts and authentic expression can emerge without force or performance. In many social situations, participation is often equated with speaking frequently, sharing opinions quickly, and maintaining a visible presence in conversation. People who talk more are often perceived as confident, outgoing, and socially skilled. However, there exists another type of social intelligence that operates very differently. Some individuals prefer observation over participation. Instead of dominating conversations, they remain quiet, watching, listening, and absorbing the subtle dynamics unfolding around them. For these individuals, silence is not a sign of disinterest or insecurity. It is a deliberate psychological position. By stepping back from constant interaction, they gain a wider perspective of what is happening in the room. While others focus on expressing themselves, observers focus on understanding others. Their attention moves toward patterns in behavior, tone of voice, facial expressions, and the emotional atmosphere that surrounds a conversation. Observation allows the mind to gather far more information than active participation sometimes reveals. When people are busy speaking, they often miss the hidden signals that accompany communication. A brief hesitation before answering a question, a sudden shift in posture, or a subtle change in eye contact can reveal more about someone's internal state than the words themselves. Observant individuals naturally notice these details, and over time, this habit sharpens their psychological awareness. This heightened awareness often makes shallow interaction less appealing. When someone is constantly observing the subtle contradictions between what people say and what they truly feel, surface-level conversation can begin to feel incomplete. Words may carry one message while body language communicates another. For someone who pays close attention to these signals, the deeper story behind the conversation becomes more interesting than the conversation itself. Another reason observation becomes more appealing than participation is the desire to understand human behavior. Some individuals are naturally curious about how people think, why they react in certain ways, and what unconscious motivations influence their decisions. Observing social interactions becomes a way of studying these psychological patterns. Each conversation becomes a source of insight into personality, emotion, and human complexity. When someone chooses observation over participation, they also remove the pressure to perform socially. Conversations often involve subtle expectations. Responding quickly, saying the right thing, maintaining humor or politeness. Observers are less concerned with meeting these expectations. By remaining quiet, they allow the interaction to unfold naturally without feeling the need to shape it through constant input. This distance can create a form of mental clarity. When people are deeply involved in a conversation, they become emotionally invested in the flow of dialogue. Their attention focuses on what they should say next or how their words will be received. Observers operate from a different mental space. Because they are not actively directing the conversation, their attention remains open and flexible. They can notice shifts in group dynamics, emerging tensions, or alliances forming within the interaction. Observation also strengthens emotional sensitivity. Quiet individuals often develop a strong ability to read moods and subtle changes in atmosphere. They sense when someone is uncomfortable, when a conversation becomes tense, or when a person's emotions do not match their words. This sensitivity grows over time because the mind becomes accustomed to paying attention to details that many people overlook. In many cases, observers are not avoiding participation entirely. They simply choose their moments carefully. When they finally contribute to a conversation, their words tend to carry more weight because they have spent time understanding the situation before speaking. Their responses often feel thoughtful and precise rather than spontaneous or reactive. The habit of observing also encourages reflection. Instead of reacting immediately to every statement or opinion, observers allow ideas to settle in their minds. They analyze what was said, consider different interpretations, and explore the deeper meaning behind certain behaviors. This reflective process strengthens their ability to understand complex social situations and human motivations. Over time, observation becomes more than just a social preference. It becomes a way of navigating the world. While others move quickly through conversations and interactions, observers move quietly through the same environments, collecting impressions, patterns, and insights. They learn about people not only through what is said, but through everything that remains unsaid, building a silent understanding of human behavior that grows richer with every moment of quiet attention. In many social environments, comfort becomes the invisible rule guiding conversation. People often choose topics that feel safe, predictable, and unlikely to create tension. These subjects allow individuals to interact smoothly without revealing too much about themselves. Casual discussions about daily routines, entertainment, or shared experiences help maintain harmony within groups, and they prevent conversations from moving into areas that might feel emotionally or intellectually demanding. While this social comfort keeps interactions pleasant, it often limits how deeply people connect or understand one another. For certain individuals, however, comfort is not the primary goal of communication. Their minds naturally gravitate toward depth rather than ease. Instead of searching for topics that keep the atmosphere light and effortless, they feel drawn to ideas that explore meaning, identity, personal struggles, and the hidden forces that shape human behavior. Conversations become valuable not because they are smooth or entertaining, but because they reveal something real about the human experience. This difference in psychological orientation often makes these individuals appear distant in ordinary social settings. When a conversation remains focused on safe topics, their attention may slowly fade. The discussion feels predictable, almost mechanical, repeating patterns they have encountered countless times before. Their mind quietly searches for something more substantial, an idea that invites reflection, a question that opens a deeper layer of thought, or a moment of honesty that reveals genuine emotion. Depth in conversation usually requires stepping beyond the boundaries of social comfort. It involves asking questions that encourage people to examine their beliefs, experiences, or fears. These topics are not always easy to discuss because they invite vulnerability and uncertainty. Many people instinctively avoid such conversations in casual environments because they disrupt the sense of emotional safety that small talk provides. Yet for someone who values depth, these disruptions are precisely what make a conversation meaningful. When individuals move beyond polite exchanges and begin sharing genuine thoughts or personal experiences, the interaction becomes more alive. Ideas begin to unfold, perspectives shift, and both participants gain a deeper understanding of one another. The conversation transforms from a routine social activity into an exploration of human complexity. Another reason depth becomes more appealing than comfort is intellectual curiosity. Some individuals possess a strong desire to examine ideas from multiple angles, to question assumptions, and to explore the underlying principles behind everyday experiences. Light conversation rarely satisfies this curiosity because it does not challenge the mind or introduce unfamiliar perspectives. Depth, on the other hand, stimulates thought and invites reflection. This curiosity often extends into philosophical and psychological territory. Topics such as personal purpose, human motivation, moral conflict, and emotional growth naturally emerge when depth becomes the focus of conversation. These discussions do not always produce clear answers, but they open new ways of thinking and allow people to examine the complexity of their own beliefs. Depth also creates a sense of authenticity that comfort sometimes lacks. When individuals share meaningful thoughts or experiences, they reveal parts of themselves that are rarely visible in casual interaction. This openness encourages others to respond with the same honesty, gradually dissolving the social barriers that normally separate people. The conversation becomes less about maintaining appearances and more about understanding the inner world of another person. For those who seek depth, the discomfort that sometimes accompanies meaningful conversation is not something to avoid. Instead, it becomes a signal that the dialogue has moved beyond routine patterns into something genuine. Moments of uncertainty, disagreement, or emotional honesty indicate that the conversation is touching real aspects of human experience rather than remaining safely on the surface. Because of this mindset, individuals who prioritize depth often speak less frequently, but with greater intention. They prefer to listen carefully, observe the direction of the discussion, and wait for opportunities where meaningful ideas can emerge. When they finally contribute, their words tend to focus on exploring the topic further rather than simply maintaining the flow of conversation. Depth transforms communication into an exchange of insight rather than a performance of politeness. Instead of repeating familiar topics, participants examine ideas that reveal how people think, feel, and interpret the world around them. These conversations often leave a lasting impression because they challenge assumptions and introduce perspectives that continue to resonate long after the dialogue ends. For those who seek depth over social comfort, conversation is not merely a tool for passing time or maintaining harmony. It becomes a pathway into understanding the human mind, a space where curiosity, honesty, and reflection gradually uncover the deeper layers of thought and experience that shape how individuals see themselves and the world around them